Breaking It Down with Frank Mackay. This is 103.9 LI News Radio.
I'd like to welcome everyone to Breaking It Down. Frank Mackay here. More importantly, our weekly session with Melissa Iteld-Jurin. Just a reminder, Melissa Iteld-Jurin is the author of Dying to Get Under the Chuppah, a young woman's journey to finding her B'Shered. Melissa, how are you?
I'm doing well, Frank. How are you?
Doing great. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. I forgot about that. We're in a new year, and you know, I sometimes I forget.
Yeah. There's a lot going on in the holidays, and you know, what about resolutions? You have any resolutions for the new year?
Yeah, not to lose my temper too fast.
Wow, I can't imagine you losing your temper.
Oh, I can. I can.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen. It's one thing to be passionate about something, and it's another thing to be like a controlled passion. So, so not to lose your temper. Has that been a resolution of yours in the past?
It may have been, but it should be anyway. So I'm making it a priority.
Well, that being said, I mean, is that your only resolution? Do you? You're not a smoker, right?
No, never smoke. No. But I think I think that also goes in hand with trying to prevent myself from getting into problems where I end up getting angry. So I need to just rearrange my life better so that I don't find myself, you know, either too overwhelmed or too stressed out.
I have a temper too. I don't know if it shows in the time that we spent, but I have a temper. It's not crazy. It's not violent. It's nothing like that. But I yell. I yell at times, and wish I can't. It's just one of those things.
You're human, and you know you can't be perfect all the time. You can't be 100% cool because it's very hard.
It's hard to do that and to be passionate at the same time. How about growing up? Did you have a temper growing up?
I think I did at times. If I were provoked enough, it would come out, and I think I'd let myself get just too affected by all kinds of little things, things that you really don't warrant your attention, that you really could be spending your time doing more productive things than letting them, fester on things that in the long run don't matter.
Yeah. What about... We really haven't spoken that much in all the conversations we've had about growing up Jewish. I mean, it's a difference. There's a difference growing up Jewish and Catholic, and I know there's similarities in all the religions, whether you're Buddhist or whether you're Muslim. But there are traits and there are characteristics of a Jewish upbringing that we don't see in other places. Growing up Jewish. Did you do all the traditional things? You had a bat mitzvah?
No, I didn't have a bat mitzvah. I mean, now everyone seems to have one. I didn't have a bat mitzvah. I don't think my father thought it was that important. And he came from a very Orthodox family, but he hadn't come over to that, thinking that bat mitzvah was a terribly important stage. So I didn't have one, and I may have had friends who did have bat mitzvahs, and now everybody has a bat mitzvah. But I didn't have one. And I did go to Hebrew school, and I was aware of major holidays. But and the funny thing is, I didn't really ask for one. It didn't happen. It really wasn't crushing for me.
Well, I didn't even think of it, but I guess the bat mitzvah is a recent situation. I mean, bar mitzvah has been going on for how long? I mean, do you have the history of that? I mean, do you have any idea of how long?
Oh, I think that there were girls having bat mitzvahs as early as the late 70s.
Yeah, what about bar mitzvahs? That goes back hundreds of years?
That's a traditional. That's a very important milestone in every Jewish boy's life. Yeah, I mean, even if the family is not that observant, that's a big deal. I mean, the bat mitzvah is very important, and it can be elaborate. It can cost more than a wedding can.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No doubt about it. I've known people that spent literally $500,000 on a bar mitzvah.
Oh, Oh, I'm sure, easily in some areas, in some neighborhoods, very, very easily. I mean, I think it's a little over the top, but they do. I mean, they go all out for it.
Let me remind folks, if you're just tuning in or you're just turning on the radio, Frank Mackay here. More importantly, Melissa Iteld-Jurin, as always, is here. I got to stop saying guest. We're a co-host here, and you'd be a very frequent guest if that was the case. But let me just tell everyone a little something about Melissa. Melissa is an author, a mother, an educator, a dancer. She's very well-rounded. Poet also. Is that true?
I'm not a poet, no. I mean,
You've never done
not
poetry?
Really. I mean, I guess I could try to write poetry, but no, I really haven't given poetry that much attention. I've studied poetry in school, but no, I'm not a poet.
Well, maybe that's what it is. I mean, you've never looked at that. And by the way, one of your mentors and your co-writer the co-author on the book is Sandra Hochman, and Sandra Hochman is a poet. Yes. In fact, some people would argue she's the poet laureate of the women's movement. So I guess where did that come into? I know we spoke to it about a little bit, but when and where did you meet Sandra?
Sandra has started out as a poet. She was writing poetry before she even went to. Before she went to college, I think she was writing poetry as a child, and then she branched out. I mean, that was her thing. That's her trademark. It's her poetry, and she had published books of poetry. She won the Yale Younger Poets Award in 1963, and she was celebrated by in those days. By Anais Nin. I don't know if you or your audience knows of Anais Nin, but Anais Nin was, I guess, was the kingmaker of poets. I guess she was the Karl Rove of the literary world in France. That's where Sandra came to her attention. Because Sandra happened to meet her at I think it was a book party, a book signing party, a literary party, and all these big names were there. And Sandra had a book of poetry out. At that time, she was married. This was her first marriage. She was married to Ivry Gitlitz, the concert violinist, who is, if anyone is up on classical music, might know Ivry Gitlitz, the Israeli violinist, concert violinist. I think he's at least 90 years old now. He was a much older man. She married him when she was right out of college, and
I think Itzhak Perlman recognizes him as an influence.
Yes, indeed. I think they both recently they did a documentary together. I haven't seen it, but Itzhak Perlman speaks of him. I'm trying to think of the other one. Isaac Stern was a contemporary of Ivry Gitlitz, and Zubin Mehta, the conductor emeritus of the Israeli Philharmonic, knows Sandra through Ivry. So there are 6 degrees of separation here.
When you talk about Sandra, and again, I'll give another reminder: Frank Mackay and Melissa Iteld-Jurin on our weekly journey here into Melissa's mind and into the events out there. But Sandra is fascinating. I mean, she's really fascinating. I did some research on her, and her documentary kind of shook things up a bit. And back in 1972, and you'll correct me, but I guess it was 73 when she first aired it or debuted.
Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah, I know it was filmed in 72 in Miami, so it probably was marketed in 73. It's probably being shown then.
Yeah, and she had Warren Beatty on there, and he seemed to be flustered. And if you think about it, Warren Beatty, she had a number of people, but Warren Beatty's an interesting case. Sandra Hochman in the film 1972, The Year of the Woman, had an interview with Warren Beatty, and he became very, very what's the word? I guess disgruntled during the interview, or kind of thrown for a loop, and he felt like I don't know, he came across being very sexist. And if you think about it, he's he is a playboy, right? Well, he's, like a notable playboy. But Sandra kind of called him on some things. And he's also a liberal, you would think that he'd be very much in touch with the woman's movement. And she discovered that he had no idea what was going on in her world and the woman's movement. And I think it was highly, I don't know, embarrassing is the word. It was, unsettling for people like him and Gary Hart, who, again, from Kennedy fame, and of course he got 10 years or maybe it was about 20 years later, I guess, he got caught on a boat called Monkey Business. And again, I'm not here to pass judgment, but what I'm saying is that she broke ground on that movie. I mean, tremendous ground, and a lot of powerful people probably didn't like how they were portrayed.
Oh, I'm sure it was not a very flattering portrayal of a lot of male characters. I'm sure did you get a chance to download the film by any chance?
No, I didn't, but I do want to. I'm dying to see it after reading about it.
Yeah, it's something else. I mean, it at the time, I think it was very avant-garde. It blew a lot of people's minds. And I think looking back at it, it is a period piece in the way it's filmed. It's a cinema verite, but it's a very revealing look at what was going on behind the scenes at the convention and in American Society for Women, and you also get a bird's eye view of the way the CBS news team and probably other news teams, which were predominantly male, conducted themselves.
Yeah, it was an eye opener from what I understand, and I have to see it. I mean, I'd love to view it and really understand it, and then discuss it with you. You've watched the movie?
Yes, I've seen it a couple of times.
Yeah, how early did you see it? How long ago?
A few years ago. I know Sandra gave me a CD of it. I had shown it to my husband, and I've shown it to some members of his family, and the reactions varied from I guess laughter to befuddlement to amazement. Yeah.
I mean, the male members reacted differently than the female members, and was there any or mixture?
Yeah. I would say I think age had more to do with it. For example, and I also think political perspective. For example, my husband is rather conservative, so I think while he was watching it, he kept an open mind about it, but he has conservative views, so I think that colored his lens, and then he showed it to some younger members of his family, younger relatives, his niece and nephew, and I think they thought it was, I don't know, something very outer worldly, and I think almost comical, because to them it's like the Civil War.
Right, it's dated.
They weren't even. Yeah, exactly.
No, it's an important film, and it certainly was important for Sandra. Again, an amazing woman, and wonderful to have as a co-author on the book. And again, the name of the book is Dying to Get Under the Chuppah: A Young Woman's Journey to Finding Her Beshered. Hooper, for those who don't follow the Yiddish language, and I had to learn this from Melissa as well. It's the canopy, the covering that a rabbi would marry a woman and a man in the Jewish faith, and the beshered. Beshered is like a soulmate, I guess, right?
Soulmate, right? You're intended.
You're intended. That's right. Now, speaking of that, I've heard you say off mic that your parents gave you quite a bit of advice on dating. Am I mistaking that, or did they kind of give advice on how you should pick a husband?
Well, they certainly did call out a lot of people they thought raised red flags in their minds, and so did my sister. I mean, if they thought something was not on the up and up, they told me right away. And there were many people they did not approve of, and I understood. Looking back at them now, what they said now, I think that the best advice I would give anyone is, don't think that this is the last ship to China. It's not. If it's not this person and you can't conform to his ways, it's not the only person, not the only fish in the sea, as they say. There are others, and you just have to wait. And that person will come. The person whose ideas agree with yours. And my parents called out a lot of people. They were, especially my father, and they were pretty close to the mark. And looking back, I would say, if I had been able to exercise patience and confidence and just belief in that there is somebody better for me, perhaps it would have been better for me just to have not dated these people, just have broken off with them sooner, because it's time and it's emotional stress, and it takes a toll on a person. And I think that's why you hear a lot of advice columns. A lot of people say, even these millionaire matchmakers says, they don't. She has her rules for first dates, and she'll tell people, don't do this or don't do that, and he's not looking for a date. And I've heard this from other dating authorities, matchmakers, and then books, self-help books will tell you if he or she is acting in a certain way, is spewing out ideas, saying certain things, look for the clues there to tell you that this person may very well be wasting your time, is not interested in the same things you are, I think many of those pieces of advice have merit, because I think I can actually vouch for them based on my experiences.
Well, it certainly is hard to argue with you on this. Melissa Iteld-Jurin is the voice you're hearing. Frank Mackay, but more importantly, author and mom and dancer and educator, Melissa Iteld-Jurin. And I would say, I'm going to call you an expert on dating, because not only did you analyze this, but you wrote about it. And again, even though you wrote about it in a comedic novel, along again with Sandra Hochman, you had to do quite a bit of analyzing. But you did bring up something just in that last piece, that I think is so important. So many women think, well, I got to hold on to this bad situation, because if not, I may be alone, or I may, have this a hard time finding somebody else. But you hit it right on the head. If you're in a bad situation, get out of the situation.
I agree, and a lot of women stay in, and men too, stay in bad situations because they feel, well, it's better than nothing. But it's not in the long run. It's not. It's taking a lot of time away from you, so that maybe you could meet someone who's more appropriate for you. And also, it's mentally and emotionally draining, and you leave feeling even worse than you did when you came in. And you look back. I mean, hindsight teaches us a lot. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say. And experience is a very tough teacher. And I find that as a person goes through, I guess, the maturation process, especially in dating, he or she learns a lot about which people are right for him, which people to trust, and which people to stay away. Then they tell you, if you're looking at something, you want to buy something and you're not sure about it, don't buy it, because chances are you're going to have to return it. May not be able to return it. You just don't buy it. I mean, there's impulse shopping. People love impulse shopping, but if you're not sure about something, you doubt, you have something tugging at your conscience, chances are it's not the right thing for you, and maybe you should just walk away from it. And I think if people would apply that to situations, even with jobs, although jobs are very difficult to just walk away from in this day and age, but from personal relationships, they might be better off. And I should have done that too. And
now, Oh, go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm just saying that I know had I had the strength to say, okay, this person is this person is wasting my time. It's not obviously not the right person for me. Doesn't share my goals. Is not going. Is not interested in pursuing the same things I am. Then perhaps I would have made my life a little bit easier. I wouldn't have put myself through unnecessary stress just to have the company. Because basically what it is you're missing the company. And it doesn't mean that this is the person that you're missing. You're missing the company. It could be a person who is verbally abusive or somebody who is never there, never treats you the way you deserve to be treated, doesn't act like a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Why stay with someone like that? Obviously, he or she is just not in it for the long run, doesn't care about you that way.
Again, Melissa Iteld-Jurin, giving words of wisdom here. Frank Mackay, very lucky to have her on the phone once a week. This is really wonderful. And again, coming from somebody who owned 3 nightclubs, I owned 3 nightclubs, and I would sit there and I would talk to and I'm not a drinker per se. I'm not I kind of sat back and watched everything. And I was very much into like setting people up and introducing people to other people. And one of the rules I came up with to tell, mostly, I guess it can go for both, but mostly women, is if your confidence is dropping in a relationship from where it was before the relationship, there's a pretty good chance that you're in a very bad relationship. Maybe the male in that situation is belittling the woman or belittling his girlfriend, or something's going on that's not making it feel right. I imagine your confidence should raise. Do you have any hard and fast rules to say to women who are going through this now and maybe they're in a bad situation, or they're not sure it's a bad situation? They don't know what's just normal growing pains in a relationship or a marriage, or they're experiencing something that's abusive, whether it's verbally or emotionally abusive.
Well, I think they need to confide in someone who can give them an honest, thoughtful answer about what's going on in their lives with their spouse or significant other, and because if you hear it from someone else, it may feel very strange, it may feel very insulting, but you need people to be able to say to you, look, it doesn't sound like this is going right, that he or she has your best interest or cares about you. It's of course it's hard when you're married and you have children, and the specter of divorce seems even worse than the marriage itself, because divorce is another conundrum, and it's not as easy. It's not that easy to walk away from a marriage, especially when you have children involved. I mean, to get divorced is like a death anyway, even if you hated the other person. The emotional ramifications are enough to make some people need to take a year off from their lives, and that's why they tell you, don't date right away if you can help it. I mean, sometimes people do meet. It's chance. It's fate. You do meet people who may hold a significant interest in your life later on, and you start becoming friendly with these people. But usually you need time to recover. It is like a death, basically. That's why I think it's important to have friends and family. Your family can be the barometer of your situation, and because they care about you, especially your own parents. They raised you, they wanted you in their lives, and they don't want to see anything bad happen to you. And it's important to go to people who are wiser, and can see beyond the veneer. And my parents, even when I was down in the dumps, when things weren't going well, and then in any situation, they could see through and help pull me up, and they could see through the intentions of other people, whether the other person had my so-called my back, and yeah, and you need people like that, because alone it's very hard. I mean, you get feelings of this isn't right. I don't like what I'm doing, and sometimes you need a friend or a family member to say maybe you should work it out, maybe you should go for counseling or whatever, or maybe this is time to part company because you're getting deeper and deeper, and you may not get out in time.
Yeah, there were so many obstacles in even advising somebody that they're in a bad situation. For example, if you shoot and miss, if you have a relative and or a friend and say, look, I think you're in a bad relationship. I think maybe it's time to get out. You don't know if that person that you're speaking to goes back to their mate, their significant other at that moment, and say, hey, look, my brother just told me, or my sister or my friend just told me that, I should get out of this thing. I mean, even bringing it up to try to change the individual, and then it works out long term, and that person holds something against you. And I think that's why people have trepidations about giving advice about something as serious as breaking up a relationship or worse yet, breaking up a marriage. I think there's so many people who just would stay silent unless it was something very obvious, like if it was a physical abuse type thing. I mean, have you come across that where you didn't want to say something to an individual because you didn't know whether they would listen or not, and you didn't feel like getting on the bad side of their mate? Yes,
well, yeah, that can be a very difficult situation. I have a friend who is in his marriage, unfortunately, is in shams. She's neither divorced or separated, although she may be, technically speaking, separated from her husband, but not legally. Now, I can't tell. I mean, some things are obvious to her. She knows. I don't have to tell her that I don't see where the marriage is going to go. It's not improving. I can't tell her, well, now is the time to get divorced, because that's her decision, and she has a child, and I can't tell her you have to get divorced now. She knows the score. If she were totally oblivious to the situation or in denial of let's say, an abusive situation, I would probably have to step in. Although I would hope that her family would say something as well. But yeah, you have to know when to draw the line. You can't force somebody to leave unless a person's life is in danger. But my friend's life isn't in danger. It's just marriage is no longer. It's just no longer there, and it's up to her and her husband when they want to decide to pursue a divorce. As long as she's not in physical harm, her daughter isn't in physical harm, then I guess they can get by for the time being. So yeah, you have to draw a line. You have to tread a very careful line, because you don't want to lose the person. You don't want to alienate the person any more than you don't want to alienate the person at all, and you certainly don't want the person to feel any worse than he or she may.
Frank Mackay again with Melissa Iteld-Jurin. She is actually talking about something very, very important here. Author, educator, mom, dancer, a little bit of everything. Not poet, though. I'm surprised not poet.
No.
Not poet. And again, we're touching on a very, very serious subject here. Now, with your students, they're roughly 12 to 14 years old. Am I right?
Yes, they are.
Now, can you tell and obviously not being specific on specific cases, but can you tell when there's problems in a marriage by the behavior of the child, or do you just realize that there's something wrong at home?
Sometimes you can get some subtle hints from the child's behavior or from snippets of conversation. I haven't seen anything recently. I haven't heard anything. I think everyone's home life is fairly intact. Although you may hear, I'll be staying. I'll be with my father, or I'm going away with my mother, or you may hear something in that to that effect. But I haven't heard anything else. I haven't seen any major displays of behavioral problems that are indicative of a family fracture. So I don't. But you will hear a kid drop hints or say, "Well, I'm going to be. I'll see my father this weekend, or my father's coming in this time, or I won't see my father until then, or my mother is bringing someone else to this parent-teacher conference, and it's a stepfather." So you can get visual and some verbal hints as well.
Now going back to a situation where somebody is in a bad relationship situation, you brought up the big point. If there's a child there, it's a completely different animal. Prior to a child being there, I personally, in my own experience, I'm more outspoken. Before I said to people on both sides, male and female, look, before, God forbid, there's a pregnancy here. Maybe it's time that you guys move on for each other. This is a toxic relationship, and I've said to women, that I was friendly with, or had a relation with, in other words, they were relative, and without being too specific, I have said, for example, look, don't look at this as your boyfriend. Look at this as the future father to your children, and there's a huge difference between hanging out with somebody or hooking up with somebody, whatever you want to call it, and having an individual raise a child with you.
Yeah, I think you probably have done these people a tremendous favor to say that, because to be a child of a divorced home can be very devastating, can impact the future in a very bad way. And I'm sure you've done a lot of people favors by saying, look, think about the future. And it may sound very blunt, but it's actually helping the person.
And again, back to the point about saying something and it coming back to bite you. I had a good friend that I introduced to, that met her future husband through me, and she actually left a guy that she should have never left. He was a terrific guy, probably would have been a wonderful husband, and she kind of got swept off her feet by this individual, and he had kids with her, but every time things would get a little heavy, he would disappear. He would disappear for a year at a time or 2 years at a time, and it was a horrible situation. And I remember saying to her, hey, listen, I think this is a horrible mistake that you're making. This guy's not responsible. He's not, and even though he was a friend, he was somebody that we enjoyed being around. He's somebody I wouldn't want a friend of mine or a sister or, God forbid, a daughter to marry. And she went back and she told the guy, and he said to me, hey, what kind of, I said, well, look what you do. I mean, you take off, you leave holes in their lives, and and you show up like a Dutch uncle every once in a while, and I think that there's a difference again, and I'm asking you, and you wrote about this with Sandra Hochman again in the book Dying to Get Under the Chuppah, a young woman's journey to finding her Beshered, and one of the co-authors of that wonderful book, Melissa Iteld-Jurin, is our very special guest, and Melissa, have you had an experience where somebody was, maybe a good boyfriend, but you knew that either for yourself or somebody else that they would not be a good parent?
Yeah, and I've seen this in my friends too. Many times. You're blinded by the opportunity to have the company. You think this is a good thing, and yourself. You've got red flags coming up in your mind, and you have some doubts. And sometimes it takes the straightforwardness of a friend or a relative or a parent to say, look, do you realize that this person is not, it's just not suitable for you. There's either too much of an age difference, or he's got different ideas, and he's not intending to walk down the altar with you, or he's verbally abusive to you. He's not treating you like a girlfriend or boyfriend, and you're getting swept away by him because let's face it, when you're single and you want someone in your life, sometimes you'll put up with things, and subconsciously you'll ignore the other factors. And you know in your heart this is not the right person. Your family and all these other people could not be wrong. So many of them could not be wrong at the same time. And yeah, I've even seen this with friends of mine. I've said, this, you're running after this person, and he's not meeting you halfway. And why are you doing this? And of course, finally, she would snap out of it and say, remember that guy Randy? Well, I would say, yeah, I remember Randy, and he turned out to be a waste of time. And his family liked me, and all these people liked me, but he just never did. He never gave me the time of day, and I wouldn't say anything. I would just think to myself, well, I'm glad you finally came around, and and I was right, because it saved you a costly mistake.
Have you ever thought about doing a version of your book that's more like self-help in dating?
I guess it could be. It could be. The thing is that I think that there's so many of those out there. What were those books? The Rules predated this.
The Rules.
Yeah, the Rules predated this book. And there was all this, it's the same thing. I don't know if I agree with every single rule that these authors pronounce, but I guess we could. I guess you could do something in a very funny vein. Maybe have a running blog where you write about something every week, and you put a little Jewish humor to it. Yeah,
I mean we spoke about the idea of being married and divorced as opposed to never being married, and I know we spoke about that a couple of times, and I do think that many of the people out there, even though, look, there are people that are happy being alone, and they've got set in their mind that they're gonna do life solo, and that's wonderful. And everyone has the right to make those decisions, and whatever makes them happy. It was ultimately just a great decision to make, but I do think that many women out there like the idea have been married, even if it's a short marriage and wasn't too destructive. Somehow it's to them, I think it's validation that, well, somebody loved me enough, or somebody thought enough of me to actually get married. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
Yeah, or they feel that this builds up their resume in the dating world. Yeah, because I've heard that too. That, well, what have you done? People are going to ask you, what have you been doing? Well, if you've reached a certain age and you've never been married, especially for women, they tend to look. But even with men, there's the people tend to look at that a little with some skepticism. But it builds up your dating resume that you were married. But then again, people wonder, well, what's wrong with you? Or are you one of those people who wants to gets divorced every few years? So it's a double-edged sword.
I guess when you look at a Larry King or or the late Elizabeth Taylor, where they've been married 8 times, it becomes silly sounding and whatever. But when somebody's been married 3 times or even 4 times, I don't judge. And I don't judge because you don't know what preceded any of those relationships. And sometimes if somebody had been married, like you mentioned Sandra, I look at Sandra as almost like a student of life, an expert on living and everything else. She probably gathered a lot of information on life and about experiences from those marriages that she applied and she put into her own her own life. So I don't look at somebody strange in a strange manner if they've been married 3 or 4 times. I guess when it gets to 8, 9 or whatever Larry King is at, and no offense, I don't know Larry from a hole in the wall, but I mean that sounds a little like almost like a caricature of a husband, or in Elizabeth Taylor's mind, the Gabor sisters. Weren't they a situation where the Gabors got married many times?
Yes, the Gabor sisters, yes.
Well, listen, we've actually, I kind of got on a roll here. I think you gave a lot of good advice, a lot of important advice here. Melissa Iteld-Jurin is our very, very, very special once a week, the Melissa Iteld-Jurin show, and wonderful information on a whole bunch of different things and a whole bunch of different subjects. Frank Mackay here, very fortunately, with Melissa Iteld-Jurin. Anything you want to say in closing? Anything? Any wishes for the new year for those who are listening?
Yeah, just, be your own best friend and take care of yourself and try to be optimistic and, do what's best for you.
If you're just joining us, we have been sharing our thoughts and hopefully a lot of good advice there from Melissa Iteld-Jurin. She is an educator. She's an author. A comedic novel is called Dying to Get Under the Chuppah, a young woman's journey to finding her beshert, and she's just wonderful. Everything you say is wonderful. Mom, a wonderful mom, wife, teacher, dancer, and not a poet. Not a poet, so I don't know where I got that from.
No,
so.
No. That's from you were
Sandra.
thinking of Sandra, I think, subconsciously.
Well, listen,
Yeah.
thank you very much. I'm going to watch the film before we speak again, and we have to talk more about it. I think it's very important that the name of the film of the co-author of Melissa is the 1972, The Year of the Woman, and I'll get that. I'll get that and download that. And Melissa, just wonderful as always.
Thank you so much, Frank.
Melissa Iteld-Jurin. Once a week, you could hear her right here on many different outlets throughout the country. And Frank Mackay, thrilled to be with her. Melissa Iteld-Jurin and Frank Mackay signing off. We'll see you next time on Breaking It Down.